If you are watching this video, it's because you want to know why I'm here, how I got here, and what is the point of this channel. Welcome to my origin story. Welcome or welcome back to Sweet Infinity. If you haven't already, please do subscribe by clicking the subscribe button on the bottom and hitting the bell icon so that you can get notified every time I put out a new video. So, my name is Kieran, and this is Sweet Infinity, my channel. I started this channel in order to channel my own spiritual and creative sides in a way that I hope resonates for people, touches people, helps people. My goal with this channel is to share the things that I have learned over my 40-something years of how to be happy in this wacky world, how to find moments of joy, how to relate to others, how to heal yourself internally. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself in this video. I was born in the late 1970s in Pakistan into a pretty working class, poor family. We moved around a lot, and there was a lot of financial and other insecurity that I faced growing up. Throughout my rather difficult childhood, one thing was always consistent, and that was that my parents, though they were imperfect, always valued my education and the education of all the kids in the family. They went out of their way to make sure that I was educated, that I always had access to books and writing equipment, even though it was very much something that they found hard to afford, but they found ways. They sold things if they had to and made sure that I got the best education that they could provide. And I was always a voracious reader. I wanted to look at maps and look at pictures from other parts of the world. I mean, this is the 80s, the 1980s. I remember I used to look at all these books that would be in other people's houses or sometimes in our house that would have pictures from different countries and different cultures or historical books. And I would read about that and I would just absorb as much as I could. I would read all the time. And what that did is that it opened my mind up to a whole world of possibilities outside of what I was experiencing on a day-to-day basis as a young girl growing up in Pakistan, which was under martial law at the time. I was also into astronomy. I wanted to be an astronaut for a while. I wanted to travel between the stars. There were a lot of things I wanted to do and be. My imagination was the most useful part of me growing up. It basically saved my life. However, I felt always like a bit of an outsider for many reasons. Eventually, my family and we all moved to the United States when I was 12 years old. That was a huge change, obviously. I gave up everyone I knew until then. Family, friends, schoolmates, everything that was familiar. And I did speak English because I went to a school there that taught us English, but it was definitely a very different culture in the United States. And this was also during the first Gulf War, so there was a lot of bigotry that I also faced because there were people who had these preconceived notions of a kid from Pakistan. So I faced a lot of these things that I did not understand at the time. At the same time, there was a lot of strife in my home. I faced a lot of issues around domestic violence and different kinds of trauma. And what it taught me throughout all of that is to find things to be centered in that were not things that other kids necessarily had. For example, when we moved around a lot and there was a lot of uncertainty, I found ways to connect with nature in different towns and cities and states that I was living in, to go to parks and near rivers or find a tree that spoke to me and go there and just write or just read or just meditate. It became a way for me to connect with a silence, a solitude. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was really getting more and more spiritual in that way. I wasn't ever really that religious, but I definitely had a very strong spiritual aspect to me. And then sometime around my late teens, I discovered tarot and some of the other practices from around the world, from indigenous cultures around the world. I really was drawn to all of that. I was drawn to ways of thinking that were outside of the rigid structures that I was raised with or that were around me living in the US. And I found it really beautiful that there was an ancient understanding of the cycles of the earth, the phases of human lives, an understanding that was deeper than either the hardcore theocratic understanding or the hardcore materialist understanding. There was something that was deeper and a more ancient way of thinking. And not that it was perfect, but there was definitely things that I felt humans, all of us, had either forgotten or had been taken away from us. And I wanted to reconnect with some of those understandings, because I don't think that only things post 1700 are worth studying or worth considering. And I always felt that there should be some way of understanding how people thousands of years ago even thought and believed and felt. And of course, I enjoy today's modern conveniences, but at the same time, I felt that nature has been there forever and we are part of nature. And therefore, we shouldn't think that we are some alien species and all the other things around us are just something else and that we're not part of that. I never had that feeling. I connected with animals from a very young age. I connected with the natural world from a very young age. It was relatively easy for me to get into things like gemstones and candles. I also loved painting, even as a child. I loved painting. I used to draw. I still do sometimes, but painting in colors, that's my jam. I was very much drawn into how our experience of the world is constructed by the language and the structures that we live under, but at the same time, there is more to it. The map, which is language and symbology, and the structures, the social structures that we live under, is not the territory, because we experience things that are outside of that and then we try to fit it all into our language. And I found ways to learn about other philosophies. For example, I studied almost every religion: Buddhism, Taoism, various Celtic and Greek and ancient Sumerian and ancient Egyptian and various indigenous Iroquois, Cherokee, and different African and East Asian spiritualities. I studied them at least to understand how people there thought, because I always thought everybody's raised to believe that their way of thinking is correct. So how do you know which way of thinking is correct? I mean, if I had just been born in a different place to a different family, I might have been taught very different things. How do we know what's actually correct? What is actually true, right? There are people who were taught very differently from what I was taught as I was growing up in a particular framework of religion and culture. There were lots of people like that. In fact, most of the people in the world have very different experiences and cultural beliefs and cultural practices than any of us. Even if we consider ourselves to be part of some majority group, there are still variations within those groups. There are different sects of each religion. There are different cultural practices. There are different interpretations. So how do you know which one is true? You have your perspective and your family that raised you a certain way or whatever you chose after that. But how do you know what's actually true? I have found that the only thing that's really true is love, whatever you want to call it. Whether you want to call it God or not, whether you want to call it the Tao, whether you want to call it the oneness, the universe, whether you don't want to have any religious or spiritual belief and just believe that kindness, morality, empathy are important things for humans to continue to exist. Whatever it is, there is a common thread that runs through all humans, or at least most, I would say, which is that everybody wants love, wants to be loved, wants to love, whether they realize it or not, whether they admit it or not. And the solution to most problems of the world is love. And I don't mean just the kind of love that is commodified and consumed and bought and sold in the form of like candy hearts or something, although candy hearts can be nice. But the idea of love being a fundamental, basic reality of the human psyche's needs and the human psyche's desires to achieve, both to do and to achieve. So we want to be loved and we want to love someone else. There is a beauty, there is a wholeness, a sense of completion in loving someone else as well as in being loved. In fact, a lot of people think they just want to be loved. And in fact, we might actually feel better being the one who does the loving. To me, all the other practices and names and religions and beliefs are all important based on the context of the person or the people who are practicing. It might be important for them, culturally valuable, connects you to your community, whatever it is. Languages differ. But at the end of the day, I don't think anyone can argue with love. If we're talking about love as in the wholeness of our feeling of belonging, our wholeness of wanting to merge with others internally, emotionally, feeling other people's pain, happiness, feeling happy when someone else is happy, feeling sad when someone else is sad. And there are different degrees to which different people can do this or feel this. But when we do, it is considered a sublime experience. Some people try to achieve it through drugs or sex or music or art, or through even more dangerous and harmful practices. But I think we can all trace it back to a need for love, whether it's stifled or not, whether it's conscious or not. And so I try to hold on to that. And I feel that there is honor and beauty in almost all other spiritual practices, in almost all human practices that are meant to drive us towards love. And I try to remember that different people are at different stages of understanding this. I have talked to people who are close to the end of their lives, and I find that this is one of the things that a lot of people understand when they are close to the end of their lives, is that ultimately what mattered was the people we loved, the things we did that were good for the world, that were good for us, full of joy, loving yourself. That to me is what this channel is about. And I went through a long period of time where I didn't really understand the depth of this, or at least I didn't let myself understand it. Maybe I did understand it on another level. I grew up with a very difficult relationship with my dad. It was up and down. There were times when we were close. There were other times when we were not. And in 2022, he died. We had been estranged for a few years before then. While he was in a coma, I went to see him. That was the first time I saw him in about 6 years. But he was already gone. He was unconscious. In that moment, before he actually passed away, I came to really understand myself, and I came to understand him on a deeper level. And I have experienced profound changes mentally and physically and emotionally and spiritually since then. When a parent dies, no matter your relationship with them, it is a life-changing experience. When a parent dies with whom you had a very difficult experience, a parent who was the cause of a lot of trauma in your life, that can be a very different experience from any other kind of death or loss. So that was about 2.5 years ago. And since then, I've been on this long journey, and I believe I will be on it for the rest of my life. And I'm trying to reconnect with my dad and the memory of my dad and the spirit of my dad, and reconcile the parts of me that can reconcile, and learn to process the parts of me and him and our relationship that were so difficult. So I am on this channel because I've been through a lot in my 40-something years, and especially in the last few years. And I want to share some of these insights with you. And I hope that you could share your insights with me. I've also learned to reconnect with my own creativity. I learned to paint again. Well, I got into it again. I've also learned to do a lot of other things in terms of creating things, crafting, making soap, wooden objects, and paper crafts. I will be sharing some of these processes here, and I'll be sharing some of the artwork here, as well as some digital art that I do on my iPad. And I hope that this is going to encourage you to get in touch with your creative and spiritual sides, which I believe are connected. They are for me. I think we're living in a world that's going through massive changes. I mean, that could be said about a lot of different periods of time, but definitely now. I don't think anyone can deny it. And I think we're moving towards a world where we're not going to just be automatons. We're not just going to be expected to be worker bees, making other people rich, slaving away for 40, 50 years in the hope of a retirement when we actually get to do the things we want to do. I think we're approaching a world where things are going to have to change so that a lot of us, most of us, get to experience the creative and spiritual side of life, which is why I think we're here. I think we're here to connect with each other, with ourselves, with our creative sides. We're here to create. I think we are all creators. And it doesn't mean we all have the same kind of ability or skill or talent even, but we have something. Otherwise we wouldn't be here. We have a spark of creativity. We were made in the image of God. Whatever you want to call it. Human beings are creative. We have been creative for hundreds of thousands of years. We are still creative. We are not meant to just waste our life slaving away at some dumb job that we don't care about. I know we have to right now because that's the system we're in, but that system is going to change. It has to, and it will. And I hope that as things change, you are able to process these changes through your own spirituality. And I want to help you get there. And I want to learn along the way too. We will learn together. We will grow together. That's why I'm here. That's the point of Sweet Infinity. I think you are creative. I think every human being is creative. I think every human being is an artist of some kind or another. Don't let anyone tell you that artists and creative people are a special breed, that you don't have it in you. Whatever you want to do that calls to your spirit, that makes you just full of joy, do it. Is it cooking, cleaning, and organizing spaces? That's art. Is it raising kids, painting houses, doing jigsaw puzzles, creating music, writing poetry, building beautiful things out of Legos, polymer clay? I don't know. There's so many things to do. You are allowed to have a creative outlet. If it requires a lot of time and investment, financial investment, okay, you have to see where you are. If you want to be a photographer, there might be more of a financial investment involved, but you also have your smartphone, I'm sure. You could start with that. Learn about composition, the rule of thirds and all that. Go out there, take photos of plants and street photography or whatever. You want to learn to play music, maybe you have to invest in certain kinds of musical instruments, but in the meantime, you can learn music theory. You can also hit up some garage sales and thrift stores and see what kind of musical instruments they have. Don't wait for retirement or some magical future where everything's going to be all fine before you will do the thing you actually want to do. You might have to do things you don't want to do, to pay the bills, to take care of business, whatever. But at the same time, carve out some time for your creative side, for your spiritual side. Whether you're religious or not, it doesn't matter. Because your creativity is your spirituality. They're connected. Go out in nature and sing a song. My goal on this channel is to help you realize that you are a creative person and you are allowed to be in touch with that side of you. Towards this end, I will be sharing more readings of my decks like I've been doing, oracle decks and tarot decks. I'm also planning to share some draw with me or paint with me tutorial type videos where you can watch me do stuff while I'm also doing some kind of chat with you. I'm also going to be doing some live streams eventually, and I would hope that you join me for those. And I might be also sharing some of my stories that I write, short stories or longer stories, maybe poems. I'm also planning to make some video essays that I'm developing. I hope you will see this place as an intimate spot for you to take a break and get in touch with that side of you that maybe you used to embrace when you were a kid and get into it again. Do a dance. You can do it. There is no rule that says that only kids get to have fun and adults have to be boring. We are here on this planet for a few decades, maybe 70, 80, 90 years, if we're lucky. Where were we before? And where will we be after? There are theories, there are ideas, but we are here now in this form. And one thing I know is that the universe doesn't have any waste. Nothing in the universe comes from nothing, and nothing in the universe becomes nothing. Therefore, there's no waste. Everything just changes form. Therefore, in one form or another, we were here before, and we will be here after. And that is why this channel is called Sweet Infinity, because I want you to have a sweet life and a sweet infinity in whatever form you and I end up in. And I love tea. So you might see me drinking tea, and you might meet some of my cats. I hope that this origin story was helpful. Leave me a comment. Tell me a little bit about your origin story. If you liked this video, please do a thumbs up and also check out the other videos on this channel. I'll be back with more cozy spirituality, wholesome creativity. Take care of yourself and take care of each other and have a sweet infinity.